All right, so welcome to the session, an introduction to SQL Server. This is part of a full course on querying SQL Server, and it is basically focused on T-SQL. This first module is going to be like an overview of SQL Server as a platform, and I'm going to switch between these slides and the practical sessions using SQL Server Management Studio. So let's just get deep into it. Now, this is a little about me. I have experience in SQL Server as well as Oracle and some other things, and I'm reachable online. If you Google Kenneth Igiri, you'll see me all over the place. So I don't need to go through this in detail. Then, history of SQL Server. This aspect, I feel, is an aspect that you can easily read up on the internet, so I won't spend too much time on it. But suffice it to say that the current version of SQL, this is a little dated, is actually 2019. Yes, and previously before then we had the 2017, and each version of SQL Server comes with its new features basically, and you're able to leverage those new features. It's sometimes important to know what version you are working with and what features are available in that version. Typically, if I wanted to find out what version I am working on, I'll just do this statement. Select at 7a. Sorry, this is 7a. I'll do select at version. So if I was in a new environment and I wanted to know what version is running, there are many ways to do it, of course, but this is a straightforward way to see exactly what you're working on. This is SQL Server 2019 RTM, and I think it's in the
Yeah,
next
my
slide. I'll
God.
show you what these mean.
Yeah.
So RTM basically
No.
means that this version of SQL Server is the base version. There's no patch on it. Let me pause a little bit. So I'm recording the session, so I have to I'm capturing all the sounds. All right, can I continue? Prince? All right, so basically, I'm sure he's muted himself. All right, basically, if I wanted to find out what version of SQL this is, I do that with this tool, select at version, and it tells me that my version is 2019 RTM. RTM means, I forgot the full meaning, but it basically means that this is the base version for this the first release of this version of SQL Server. You can see the details of these versions and on some websites like SQL Server Updates, if I'm not mistaken, .com. I'll just show it to you quickly. 1 minute. Then there's another one, SQL Server builds.blogspot.com. I'm going to display it right now. My internet is also giving a little bit of issues. All right, so this is a website called SQL Server Updates.com. So it gives you all the list of SQL Server versions that are currently available. This is the current build 18.5, the latest update for the current build. This is version 2019. These are the updates that are available for 2019, 2017, 2016, and so on and so forth. This is the most recent. Now, there's another environment I like, that the website I like to use. This is SQL Server builds.blogspot.com. Of course, you can get this information on the Microsoft site as well, but these sites make it easy for you to see. I use this one a lot. So this tells you that this is the latest release. This release has no service pack. SP stands for service pack, and this is the latest cumulative update. Service packs actually stopped in SQL Server 2017, if I remember well, and this is the latest cumulative update 4 for SQL Server 2019. So in our environment, we are using SQL Server 2017, the base version. If you go down this site, okay, first of all, RTM means release to manufacturing. So that is that's what we have. Remember on our that we're going to be playing with today. The release to manufacturing version. That means that there's no service pack on it and there's no cumulative update on it. It's just a basic install of the first release of SQL Server 2017. If you go down on this site, you'll see more details about all the cumulative updates that were released for SQL Server 2019 up till the latest one. You also see the build numbers. You see that the build number for SQL Server 2019 is 15.0.2000.5. If you go down to 2017, it also has a build number 14. So and so. So for each release, for each patch they release, each cumulative update, there's a new build number, a new file version, and so on and so forth. You can get all that information here on SQL Server builds.blogspot.com. So let's get back here. So our version is 2019 RTM, so we don't have any of the cumulative updates installed. Let's go back to our slides. So this history keeps getting updated as new releases of or as Microsoft gives us new releases of SQL Server. Now editions, this is another concept which we find in SQL Server. Editions, basically what they group each version of SQL Server into what is called editions. Now what it means is that there are variants of that particular version depending on the functionality that is available or the complexity of the functionalities available, the number of functionalities available, and the degree to which those functionalities can serve organizations. For example, if you want to look at the Express edition, if you have an Express edition, you have limitations. For example, you cannot have a database that is larger than 10 gig. You cannot have high availability. Express editions are typically for your personal work, your personal practice. You have the developer edition, which is for you to do development work in an enterprise, but is not for you to use for commercial purposes. It's not for production. We also used to have the web version and the standard and the enterprise. Most large organizations like ours, we use enterprise edition because enterprise edition offers you the complete set of capabilities in everything in HA, everything in DR, everything in performance, all the limits, the maximum limits of SQL Server is it's fully available in an enterprise edition. The standard editions have certain limitations. In Microsoft documentation, you will see the specifics of what the limitations are for each of the editions. Then one of the key concepts that when you start working with SQL Server, especially if you worked with other other database platforms, is the concept of an instance when compared to a database, and so on and so forth. So in a typical, let me pin this so that we can see well. In a typical SQL Server installation, the relationship between an instance and databases is what you call a one-to-many relationship. That means you can have many databases in one instance. I have another instance here. I'll just start it up and then we'll see what we're talking about. Yes, let me see. I'll just start it up, and so we'll see that we'll have two instances, and in each of those instances we can have many databases within them. Now, an instance can be either a named instance or a default instance. When an instance is a default instance, you discover that it takes the name of the host. It takes the name of the host, and it takes the default port of 1433. port numbers, the listening port number in SQL Server can be changed, but the default port number is 1433. When, and you have that is a static port. When you have what do you call it, I have an Express edition here, and it's typically installed as a named instance. When you have a named instance, the port number is dynamic. That means that it changes. It basically takes up a port number every time you restart the instance. Every time you restart the instance, it takes up a port number. So you have to make sure.
Hello, Ken.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Hello.
So
Here.
please, if it just like DHCP,
something like that, but
like the way.
yeah, it's something like DHCP, dynamic. So I'll show you where it is recorded. Just give me a minute. Let me just try to log into this one.
Okay.
Yes, so I'll show you the details of the port configuration, but you have to understand that whenever you install a named instance, by default, the port number is dynamic. So there was an experience I had some years ago when around 2013, 2014. Some people were troubleshooting after doing a port opening. They were troubleshooting why it wasn't going through. They were there for hours until I got into the call, and when I looked at the instance, I realized the instance is a named instance. And when you install named instances next, by default, the port number is not 1433. It is a dynamic port. So you have to find out which exact port is it using at that time for you to know which port you need to open and how to troubleshoot any communication issues. But back to what I was saying, I'll come back to that. I was saying that you can have here, in this case, we have what? 2 instances. And then in each instance, we have, multiple databases. And the databases are typically of 2 types. You have the system databases and the user databases. Now, the system databases come predefined, pre-installed with SQL Server. And every time you install an instance of SQL Server, it comes with they have their functions, and we'll go over them in the course in this course. Let's go back a little to the issue of port numbers. Now, if I go to my SQL Server Configuration Manager, I am going to see that I have all my instances installed here. This is what will really tell you which instances are available. It is possible that if this instance is down, I may find out that I'm not able to log into it. But for me to really be sure whether that instance exists on the server, I have to come to SQL Server Configuration Manager or maybe Services. Then when I come here, I can see a lot of detail about this instance. For example, let me show you something about this instance which is important. When I go to the properties of the instance, I think that properties has come this way. If I go to properties of the instance, where are you? Sorry about that. Let me just come back. Yes, I can find out the account name that is used to run this instance. I can find out the service details. What's the start mode? Is it manual? I set this to manual on my machine because I don't want it to start every time I start my desktop because I don't want it to take up resources unnecessarily. Then this is a binary path. That means the path where SQL Server is installed, and you can use this command to actually start SQL Server. Then you have the state, whether it is running or not. You have a file stream configuration, which is another a feature of SQL Server that is not what we are focused on now. You have the always on availability groups pane, where you configure always on if you are setting it up for the first time. This is where you enable always on. And then startup parameter. This is very important. One of the things that is important about this is that it tells you where the master data file is located. Whenever you start an instance of SQL Server, it must go and look for this master data file, because the master database, recall that we were looking at this earlier, the master database is the first database that must start when you start SQL Server. Is the first. The external program that brings up the engine must know where that data file is. And it is this parameter that tells it where that data file is. There's also the error log parameter. It must know where the error log is sitting because it must start writing to the error log from the point at which you start the instance. And it must also know where the master log file is. Later on, we'll talk a little bit more about data files and log files. Essentially, when you say a database, you're saying it's a collection of data files. That's all you're saying. Like you are seeing now that databases, as far as SQL Server is concerned, databases sit inside instances. Databases sit inside instances. So you can have many databases inside one instance of SQL Server. Okay, so I wanted to show you that. These are one key startup parameters. What else is here? These are more details, more parameters, set up by default typically with SQL Server. So it gives you an overview. All these, a number of these parameters can be configurable, like log pages in memory, instance file initialization, and so on and so forth. Instant file initialization, well, that's a whole new topic, but it basically means that when you tell SQL Server to create a data file, it doesn't try, it can do it much faster. It doesn't try to zero out the blocks on the OS level first. It just acquires that block of storage and creates a data file out of it. And you typically need certain privileges to the SQL Server service account for that to work. You have something called log pages in memory. This gives SQL Server the power to take memory from the operating system and retain it within itself and only release it when the database really needs it. You need this configuration when you're setting the limits for SQL Server memory usage. Okay, so those are some of the things that you see here. So let's come back. So like I said, when you start up the instance of SQL Server, it must know where the master database is. Now, the master now in turn knows where every other thing is. The master will now open the tempdb. The master has a record of where the tempdb data files are. That's what you see in something called select star from sys.master files. Yeah. So anytime you see this is most of the time these are what you call catalog views or catalog system views that give you information or metadata information about the entire instance. So the master database, you see this sys.master files actually is sitting in the master database. This is a catalog view, if I'm not mistaken, that sits inside the master database. If you want to see all the catalog views and tables that are in the master database, it's as simple as extracting this. And a lot of them are, they are, what do you call it, intuitive in their naming. For example, if you see sys.availability replicas, that will tell you that this view, this is a view, right? This is a view, will give you information about the availability replicas in an availability configuration. If you say sys.database files, this will give you information about the database files. You say, oh, sys.databases, this will give you information about the, and so on and so forth. So the master has a collection of system objects of dynamic management views, catalog views, and all that are able to give you a complete description and information about the entire instance. That's where all that is stored. That's why the master must start first, and then the master goes to look for where the temp is and all other things while it is starting up. It must start first, and for it to start first, the configuration, the installation of SQL or the SQL engine must know where the master data files are. So that is very important. So once it starts, it can now start opening all the databases that are on that instance. So let me show you something in the log. Let's go to the log for, let's close this instance. Go to the log for the main instance we have, the default instance we have, SQL Server logs, current. So let's see what happened when I first started this instance. Okay. Eben, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm following.
We're together, right? Okay. All right. So let's look at this. Yeah. This is all the things that happened when I started this instance. First of all, it reads the configuration details of the instance. UTC adjustment sets the time and so on. All this is part of this first entry. Then it acquires a process ID. Now, what is the process ID? If we go to services, or if we can get it from task manager. We can get it from task manager. If you come here, if you go to details, right? Yeah. Yes, I have a column for PID here. If I have a problem with SQL Server that denies me all other ways of terminating the instance, I can come here, identify. Can you see that it's the same number? I can identify the process ID on the operating system level, and I can terminate it. You get? So this tells you the process ID that was acquired from the operating system when this instance of SQL started. So that's another an important thing. Then it tells you where the environment where it's sitting. It tells you what the authentication mode is. It is reading all this. It's preparing itself to start up. You see that it has opened the error log. So it tells you, remember that there's a configuration entry that tells it where the error log is. That open the error log, starts writing to it. It tells you who the service account is. It now starts reading the configuration, the startup parameters, and uses those startup parameters to open the master database and so on and so forth. And then it determines what are the resources that are available to it. It knows, okay, I have one CPU socket with two cores of CPU, and it also knows how much memory it has. What else is this? Yes, it has 12 gig of RAM, and allocate some buffer pool. This is where all the calculations take place. It's like a scratch pad for the instance, where you have things like it will temporarily store queries and all that. So you have to acquire that from memory, determine when SQL Server takes up memory from the OS, it has to compartmentalize it internally to know where am I going to put my buffer pool, where am I going to put this aspect of memory. There are many aspects of memory, and typically they are recorded in what you call memory clerks inside SQL Server. Then query store settings, and so on and so. So a lot of things are going on here as it starts up. It just basically sets up itself, defines the environment that it's in, tells you some of the key parameters that are on, resource governor, the port number that is listening. Okay, let's talk about this port. This is UDP 1434. This is not TCP. This is UDP 1434. The purpose of this port number is for it to advertise the instance, basically. So when somebody wants to come into this server to find out, is there any instance of SQL Server on this server, it will scan port UDP 1434. That is why when we go to an environment like the cardholder environment, PCI DSS requires that we disable this capability. How do we disable it? We disable it by shutting the SQL Server browser down. So we disable the browser. That's what we do, so that it will not advertise the instance. It's a security measure to make sure that you're not advertising your instance. So this 1434 defined as UDP 1434 for advertising the instance, allowing you to be able to scan the server and know whether there's an instance of SQL Server there.
Quick question. Does it mean that on Postilion, the SQL Server browser is not run on the service?
Yes, precisely. So that's what it's supposed to be. Yes, you're correct. except somebody has
Oh,
changed it. So it's not expected to be running inside a cardholder environment. Okay. All right. So another thing that happens here is, okay, it sets up what you call a service principal name. So it has to register an entry in the domain, that defines, you can see more details of this here, that defines this whole service principal name is a whole new topic on its own inside in Windows, but it has to register itself a service principal name on the domain where it is sitting. What else? Then it starts opening all the databases. Look at this database. It's called my MS SQL System Resource. It is a hidden database. You don't see it when you look at it here. That is why sometimes when you don't see it here at all. You don't see that MySQL System resource database. You don't see it. That is why when they ask you how many system databases do you have in SQL, they're actually 5. They are not 4. I think some people even say 6. They're actually 5 system databases typically. Then it starting up these user databases. The engine can do this because it's reading all the information from the master, which has already been opened. So they are all starting up. And then redo. What redo means is that the last time these databases went down, they went down abruptly. So SQL Server will read the transaction log and use the information there to bring all the databases to a consistent state before finally opening them. Yes, before finally opening up all the databases, and the databases will now be available. That is why sometimes when you have a very large database and it shuts down abruptly, it takes a long time to come up because all this redo and undo has to happen. This is another topic, recovery has to happen before the database eventually comes up. So what you would typically in that case, just watch to see that it's progressing. If it is progressing, the wisest thing to do is to allow it complete the recovery and open up. So that is that. What else are we saying here? All right. So I will just glance through the error log to tell us what happens when you open up, we start up SQL Server, and this is all based on the concept of instances and what? Databases. So in SQL Server, databases sit inside instances. In SQL Server, you can have up to 50 instances on a single server. Up to 50 instances on a single server. If it's a clustered server, you can have up to 25 instances. The first instance you install is called a default instance, and all others are named instances. All the other named instances, you can they will by default pick up a dynamic port number. Yes, I was going to show you that where that is defined. They'll pick up a dynamic port number, but you can change the port number and determine what you want it to listen on. All right, so SQL Server network protocols for SQL Server, this TCP IP properties. Yes, so this tells you which port number the instance is listening on. This is the TCP port, which is the static port in this case. In the other instance, let's look at it. This is a, let's see if I'm not changing it, is a dynamic port. When you say dynamic port, you see 0 here. That means every time you start it up, it will pick up another port number. So let us see what is this port number that it is using right now. So let's go in and see whether we can find that out. Let's start -ano pipe find string, if I'm not mistaken, SQL. Okay. Okay. First of all, let's call it up. We have a lot of it, so we need to isolate. Okay. Anyway, it's not so much, so let's look at it cleanly. So let's see. Let me see. We know we have where's the port listening on this side, 1434 listening, 1433 34 1433. Oh, hold on, let me just be sure. I hope I didn't change it. So find string. Okay. No. Let's start, and I think okay, let's see whether we can get the right command to use here. Connections, protocol, this connection template, address and port numbers. Yes, okay, let's try this. B. Okay, let's go. Let's open it again. Let's run it as administrator. All right. Let's start -ENOB. Okay. I have, let me see whether I can widen this. It's good to do this impromptu width. Let's change the width. Window size. Let's try it again. Okay. Let me remove one parameter. Sorry, I need to format this properly. Buffer size. This is I okay. All right. I think that should be it. Screen buffer size. Wait. Right. My system hanging or still doesn't want to stay. Okay. 300. Layout. Window size. I'm not sure that I'm using the correct parameter. Oh, we'll get it. Okay. Let's look for SQL Server. Find string SQL. That's my problem. Sorry for this delay. So I've tested this before starting. So what I just want to show you, in fact, I think I'm even going about it the wrong way. Let's look for patented tree actually. Okay. Find string. Okay, I'll have to come back to you on that. It's taking too long and I'm not getting the setting for this window. But the point is, I just wanted to show you how to determine. I've shown you one way to determine what port number is listing on. This is a smoother way where you don't even know the number, where you cannot do navigation to the SQL Server Configuration Manager. We'll probably get that another time. All right, so
Yeah, hello, so Ken.
yes.
So it means that if you were to use the command prompt console, we will get 0 as the dynamic port number for
No,
the
you will not get
installed.
0. Will not get 0.
Okay.
In fact, it's important. It's important. We will get the port number that it's actually using. You get.
Okay.
We'll get the port number that it's actually using. It won't be 0. It will be. That's why it's very important to find it actually. Let me see whether I can quickly. Where's okay. I don't know why I'm missing the command. Give me a minute, huh?
Okay.
Okay. Number of buffers, 4, cursor size, layout, height, width, window size. Okay, now if I wanted to type, I wanted to type 1, 2, 3, 4, you can. Start slash question mark. Okay. Aha. I think we can even just take a shortcut instead of trying to display the name of the service. So A and O. Now E and O. Let's use our other style. This is let's sort this. So we have SQL Server. This is 15244, right? Remember that we found out the PID for our instance before, right? So we can use that. Yeah, the process ID. So we can use that to find it instead of that display that wasn't showing up very well. So find string. The one we found was 25204, right? 25204. So this guy is listening on 1434, which is not what I expected to see. But let's go ahead. Then let's look at the other guy. Of course, listening on 1434 UDP. I understand that, but I expected to also see the actual port number. Now, so the other one is 15244. Okay. This is the SQL Express. Okay. Let's see a list. The column for process ID is this column, so let's see whether we can find it. I'm not sure why this is not showing up, but I think we should let's let it go. I can find out later why it's not showing up here. All right, so but basically you're not going to see 0. You're going to see the actual port number that is listening on. Okay, so and that is what will give you an idea of what to do with the service, but I will come back to that later. Normally should show up in when you use netstart. Netstart gives you a list of the service, the port numbers that are available on your server. All right, let's move quickly. It's already 6 o'clock, and look at some other aspects. All right, so I basically what I've done already is to give you a demo of navigation, going through all the instances, databases and all that, and being able to find out the environment you are in. So these are the commands that I used earlier to find out the version of SQL you are on and the server name. Okay, so this is a full script to describe the entire environment that you are in. I'll pull it out and we'll try it out now. So let me just pull it out while let's just try it out and see what this guy gives us. So I'm here, I'm going to open up a script. I believe I will find my script somewhere. So let's go back to OneDrive. Simplex. Okay. Okay. All right, so this guy is this is the one. In fact, you can use this now. This is basically server property, find out the edition, engine edition, whatever. So this function is able to give you these details about the instance. If you can arrange it in such a way that each property item becomes a column and is aliased as a column. Whenever you use as in SQL, you're doing an alias for the column that you have defined earlier. When you do that, it comes out neater. So it tells us that this instance is on a machine called Igiri01. The server name is Igiri01. It doesn't have an instance name because it is a default instance. Remember that I said there's a difference between a default instance and a named instance. When you have a named instance, you should see a name in that column. Instance name is SQL Express in this case, right? But in the a default instance, you don't see an instance name. Is it clustered? No. NetBIOS name, edition. Remember we talked about editions. This edition is the developer edition. You're allowed to use it for non-production purposes, but it has all the features of an enterprise edition. Product level RTM, release to manufacturing. Remember we talked about the fact that this means this is the first release of this particular version. Product version, we saw this on the website that I referred to. Process ID. Collation. Collation has to do with the language, the character set. So there are certain meanings for these general. Latin 1 is English-like character sets. General, CP1, CI, case insensitive, accent sensitive. For example, if you know in French, sometimes you have a caret on top of E. That's an accent. So this instance can do French, can do English, and so on and so forth. So basically, the collation means the character set. And if you go to Saudi Arabia or work in Dubai and you have to work on SQL Server in Arabic, it will have a different collation, and so on and so forth. Is it full text installed? Yes. Do you have integrated security only? That means is it Windows authentication only? Yes. Is HA enabled? No, there's no HA here, and so on and so on. So you have a whole lot of server properties that you can query in any instance where you have them. This is called database property. If I look for one of my specific databases, let's say this, I can get the details of this database as well with something with database property as against server property. Remember, when you say server inside SQL Server, you're talking about the instance. When you say database, you're talking about a database that sits within that instance. So I don't have all this detail. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I made a mistake with that. You define the database here. So I can just do MDS that, replace all. All right, and I can find out the properties of it. So it's the collation is the same as the server collation. Addition is not applicable. Is in full recovery mode. Is online collation as collation. So there's an error somewhere here. The status as status. Remember, it's an alias. You can alias anything. So collation status online collation access multi-user is not in single user mode. It's in multi-user mode. Version. So this version actually, it's possible after you've patched a SQL Server instance that a database can be attached and is not actually at the same level as the instance. So these are all a lot of the things you can find out about an instance where you are sitting. So these are other catalog views that you can use. We'll see them as we go along to examine your environment. So let's go a little further in the slides and find out more. So components. When we went to the SQL Server Configuration Manager, we saw a number of items here. These are some of the components of this installation that we have. We have the main database engine here. We have full text engine here. We have a SQL Server agent. If we had other features installed, whenever you install SQL Server, you have the option of installing all the features that you select a specific set of features that you want. For example, I have not installed analysis services here. I have not installed reporting services. I have not installed integration services. But you can do that, and depending on what you want to use your instance for, the whole set of features that you can install and call them components of your installation. Now, that's one of the beauties of SQL Server, is that once you license a particular, when you get a particular license, you have a whole lot of features to explore when you install do your installation. All right, you also have the management tools. We've been using SQL Server Management Studio all this time. We also looked at the configuration manager and what it does. We have a tool called Profiler, which we used to you know, like do some performance analysis, web database tuning, advisor, and so on and so forth. You have a lot of tools that you can use to manage your environment, do performance tuning, execute certain tasks, etc, etc. So each of them, there's a level of depth you can go to in understanding how they are used. All right, books online. Everything I can ever tell you, or anyone can ever tell you about SQL, is mostly documented in books online. These days, all you have to do is go to Microsoft, what do you call it? Docs.microsoft.com, and you see all the documentation about SQL Server. All the documentation about SQL Server is available on docs.microsoft.com. So if anything is confusing, you come here, docs.microsoft.com. In fact, if I type it in, docs.microsoft.com, okay? Now, let me ask a question. Can you remind me of one of the functions that I have used before I go there? When you come to docs.microsoft.com, you just go to SQL, a lot of other things. Remind me of one of the functions that I've used during this lecture. Give me one. I used, right? You remember that?
Come again. I didn't hear you.
I said one of the functions I used during this lecture. I've used at server name, right? And I've also used at version. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So, Eben, are we together? So I can come here and find out everything there is to know about the function called at version. So let's go. Remarks: the at version results are presented in one varchar. You can use server property function to retrieve individual property versions and so on and so forth. What does it return? What does at version return? SQL version, process architecture, and so on and so forth. So everything about this function is documented. If I say I want to find out about at server
name,
right?
Yeah.
I search it and I find out about it here. So it gives me all the details. What does it return? What are the details that it returns? It even gives examples. Select this and so on. Now, one of the catalog views I've also queried is sys.master files, right? So I can try to find out about that. Sys.master files. It tells me what each column in that catalog view means. Database ID. ID of the database to which the file applies. The master database is always 1, right? File ID. ID of the file within the database. So on and so forth. Name. Physical name. State. When you see 0, it means it's online. 1, restoring. 2, recovering. 3, and so on and so forth. So everything is actually described here in graphic detail for every aspect of SQL Server. If I want, I think I also created databases, right? I have to see sys.database, or otherwise it will give me information about databases as in terms of the database as a concept. All right, we've done 1 hour 15 minutes, right? So we have about 15 minutes to go. My internet connection is unstable. That's because we're in Africa. All right. So sys.databases. So I can find out everything about that catalog view. Go ahead, come on, open it. That catalog view, I can see all the columns involved, the name of the database, database ID, owner of the database, compatibility level, right? Collation, etc, etc. All right, so that is where docs.microsoft.com, the official documentation for Microsoft in general, and you can go to SQL Server specifically there. Are we still together?
Yes, sir.
All right. So let me features. We went through this. I think this one you can read an overview of it. The features that are available in SQL Server, high availability features are the following: log shipping, mirroring, availability groups, compression, file restore, indexing, online indexing. When you say something online, that is you can do the perform the operation while this instance is running. Scalability, multi-instance support up to 50 per server, resource governor to limit the resource usage per user or per database in your environment. Buffer pool extension, you can use an external RAM to increase your buffer pool capacity, data compression, and so on and so forth. Security aspects and features contain databases. That means I can, just like what you have in Oracle, where you're now talking about pluggable databases. SQL Server started doing it in 2012, where you can remove a database from an instance, plug it somewhere else, and everything it needs to work is there, except I think the jobs and all that. Then TDE is available, transparent data encryption. It's been there since 2008. So if it tell you, okay, you need to encrypt the database at rest, you just use TDE. User-defined roles, backup encryption, role-level security have been available since 2016. Always encrypted started in 2016. Replication types, merge, transactional, snapshots. Then the management tools that are available. You can manage, if you want, if you're a black screen person, you can focus on command line. If you want to manage the instances, you go to configuration manager, the management studio profiler, the agent, tuning advisor for performance tuning, and so on. This is an example of logging into the instance using command prompt. We can also try that out here. Okay, so SQL command cmd, right? Our server is, in fact, we don't even need to put our server, right? Because we are on the server itself, right? Select, and we're using Windows authentication, right? But every time you enter a command, you do a go, right? So this tells us our server name at version. You didn't know this before, right?
Oh, I know you can manage it on what they call command prompt, and then I think PowerShell. Can you do it on PowerShell too?
Yeah, you can do it on PowerShell. In fact, PowerShell is a whole new level. In fact, if you learn PowerShell, actually, there are so many things you can do from PowerShell on SQL Server that are way beyond this. And it's also the interface and the experience is much better than command prompt on PowerShell. Select name from sys databases, right? So we're inside. We can also do that. All right, so yes,
It's very interesting.
very, very interesting. Yes. So if you want to,
It's just like using the Linux to
yeah,
manage
because
Oracle.
you know SQL is presently on Linux since 2017. So the truth is that if you have a deployment on Linux, you are likely to have to be able to use you are likely to need to use SQL command inside the Linux box, more than ever. Okay, what else?
I mean, sorry to cut you. So that means that them deploying SQL Server on Linux, that means that the storage and everything will be hosted from like Linux
Yeah,
or
everything is
Wow.
available on Linux, Ubuntu Linux, Red Hat Linux, and even I think those are the main two ones. I think it's also available on CentOS. Yes, available on CentOS, and of course it's available on containers too. So these days it's very easy to deploy a SQL Server container. If I'm not mistaken, I think I did a write-up or a video on it. You know, using SQL on containers. So that's basically, so these are some of the tools, practice it. And we have about 30 slides to go. Yes, manageability, PowerShell scripting support. Of course, you mentioned that. Utility control point for monitoring. Contain databases, buffer pool extension. I repeated that. CLR supported file stream. File stream is basically a way for you to access flat files from inside SQL Server. For example, in the core banking application called FlexCube, you have something called clubs. You can, when you have a signature and you upload it as a file, an image, it is stored inside Oracle as a club or a blob. That's binary large object or character large object. Now SQL Server can actually circumvent that, and I'm sure, I think Oracle has a feature like that too, where by having the files sitting on an operating system file system, and then you'll be able to query or access that data from inside SQL. So that is what file stream is about. You have service broker, which is basically for messaging across from database to other platforms, and of course SQL supports XML. So there are some interesting integration services, import and export. Integration services just have to do with anything you're doing inside SQL Server to talk to separate systems. For example, you want to move data from Oracle to SQL or from SQL to Oracle. That's an integration functionality. You can use import and export. You can use packages, SSIS packages to do that, and on and on. Master data services. That is how the platform where you can manage your master data. Master data is basically like the reference data in an organization. For example, your customer data is master data. That means every system, you can have all your customer data sitting on one particular system, and every system across the enterprise will, refer to that one system as your authoritative source of truth with respect to customer data. So SQL Server has that capability, but it's not so mature based on what I've seen. Of course, data warehouse available, business intelligence for reporting, SQL Server reporting services, business intelligence services, and then the respective clients that you can use to, manage those reports, the report builder, Power Pivot, and so on. And you also have database mail, which we use a lot. Data quality services for cleaning of data, stream insight for clickstream services, and so on. So finally, we have about 24 slides. SQL Server Limits. You can also read this up. It tells you, like now, I know sometimes people say, this database is too large. The limit of database size in SQL Server is actually 524 petabytes. It's very difficult to get to this limit. So the problem is not a limitation in SQL Server most of the time, it's a limitation in your ability to design the database properly or to maintain it properly. The largest database you can have in SQL is 524 petabytes. And you can have up to 32,767 databases per instance. But of course...
So that means that, hello?
Yes, I'm listening.
In our case like this, you can host FlexCube database.
You can host FlexCube
Nigeria.
database in SQL, precisely. You can host whatever. There's a database called Sql Server. Let me open it for you. Let me open it. Sql Server stores, I hope I can get it. Sql Server. What? If I'm not mistaken. It stores STSS Sql Server. Let me see. Yeah. What is stored here is basically the data. This is data with respect to astronomy, the study of the stars. Let me see whether if I remember very well how to view, and you should be able to, yes, let me see, it's here. It can allow people to view the galaxies in real time, right? This environment sits on SQL Server. And I can't remember the size, but you can imagine an environment where people are accessing, and all this data is stored the world over. It's not like 10 gig or 100 gig or 500 gig or 10 terabytes or 50 terabytes. That's not what we're talking here. This is a big environment and it sits on SQL Server. You can view these locations in space in real time. So you
Hello.
can, yes, please.
Yeah, but then it keep transactions like the way our core banking applications you'll be doing read and write, read and write, read and write. Is it the way
Now,
this Sky
now when we
server operates?
when we talked about, of course, you are going to be writing the data that you are capturing continuously in this environment. That's the first answer to your question, which is, in fact, okay, of course, you also know that T24 runs on SQL Server. You are aware of T24, right?
Which one is that? I'm sorry, I'm lost.
T24 is a it's a core banking application. T24 core banking. There are, yes, Temenos T24, and it actually does run SQL Server and some benchmarks, core banking benchmarks. So Oracle benchmark, you have sorry, let me look for it for you, SQL. So there are benchmarks that were done with T24 on SQL Server with I think Intel. Okay, this is all. And those were actually the benchmarks based on which Microsoft claimed the fastest database. Do you understand? Meanwhile, T24 is also supported on Oracle. Benchmark test results, 500,000 SQL on T24. Okay, this is average 500,000 fund transfers. When you use SQL Server, 697,000. Security average this, and so on. So these benchmarks tell you the performance of SQL with T24 when compared with other systems. Do you get the point?
Okay.
So there are documented reports on it. So as long as the application supports running on SQL, your limits are very high. In fact, but in this case, we're just talking about size first. There's also the benchmarks related to transactions per second. If you open the SQL Server documentation, you see more details of these. User connection, these are concurrent connections, like 2,677. Columns per second statement, 40,000. Then you have specific limits. So the point is that these limits are not small limits. So when somebody has a 4 terabyte database and is saying it's too slow, the answer to that question is not that the database is too big. The answer is typically that the database is not properly optimized. You get the point? That's the point we're trying to make. All right. So then let's move to engine components, internals of SQL. Hello, I think Eben has dropped.
Yeah, he told us. He told the battery was
okay. So
was running.
So basically,
yeah. Okay, I don't know if for him to also have an equal share. I don't know if we can.
We want to stop here, right?
So that we don't run because we are doing the classes together.
Yes. Okay, that's fine. I can stop here and we'll do an overview of what we did, and then we'll continue from here the next time. I'll just think.
How many slides do we have more to complete?
This is about 23 slides, 22 slides.
Okay.
For this is just the introductory module. There are others after this. This is just introduction to SQL generally.
With this lockdown, I think we can utilize it. Maybe we take 2 hours, 2 hours of your time, your free time every day, then
You already
you
proposed
just
that. I said I'll think about how we eventually, allocate the allocate the time. So
me personally, I'll buy you what is it called, data. Don't
like
worry.
seriously, I hear you.
Oh, seriously, like seriously, yes. Because
All right.
I need the knowledge. I need the knowledge,
Yeah.
so I'll buy you data.
Let's see what we can do within next. Maybe we'll do another one on Monday. We can do. I'll talk
Okay.
to you then and see whether I can do another one on Monday. Then, if you have questions on this, you also come back. We'll review the questions and go.
Mm.
So, thank you for your time. We shall continue. And
Right. Thank you. Thank you. But then, can you a minute? A question. Can you
yes,
go back to your studio, your
okay,
SQL management studio?
yes.
Okay. Can you drop down the uh-huh.
The what? The default
Yeah,
instance.
drop down the instance. Yeah, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've
So
expanded it.
with the other folders, let me put it that way.
Which other folders?
You
This
didn't explain. You
the
didn't
objects.
explain.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So when we come next time, we'll go into detail about what these
With security.
nodes are for. Yes, what these nodes are for. The login, server rules, credentials, I know quite a
Yeah,
number of them,
and
but I
then
don't know
the
all of them.
polybase.
The polybase, beautiful. Is interesting. Polybase allows you, if you enable the feature, it allows you to actually access multiple kinds of databases from within SQL Server, from within Management Studio. Like you
Oh,
can have
okay.
Oracle, you can have Hadoop,
MySQL.
you can have Hadoop, and so on and so forth. So I've not used it extensively, but I experimented with it just once. So basically, the purpose is for you to access these multiple kinds of databases from one point and be able to do packet
Okay.
SSI transfers among them.
So ideally, if I understand it could just be like data DB link or something. Oh.
Not the DB link because it's not like it's persistent. It is like a tool that you're using to open these different kinds of databases. That's
Okay.
what it is.
Okay. And then the management and then the other. Okay,
Yeah, of course.
management.
You know that about policy-based management. Here, you can decide and say, okay, I want. You can define new policies. Yeah, and say, for example, now we want new policy. We want our instances to be using. Let's name. Let's say instance or authentication. When you say authentication, you say targets, new condition. The condition you want is that, let's say, let me see something I can. It's a whole detailed kind of thing. Application rule, facets,
Yeah.
authentication. Server security. Okay. I have forgotten some, yes. Authentication. Okay. Now this requires more detail. I have to pay more attention to. Yes, I think it's login mode. Yeah. Let's say you say login mode. Login mode equals to. Sorry, cancel. Integrated. And then say okay. So this is login mode. Then you say okay. When you define this policy, right? You are saying you can evaluate it on demand or on schedule. Now, targets, restriction. Yes, if I Okay, let's leave this part, but let me just basically explain what it's doing. When you define this policy, you can now decide that I want to enable it and then evaluate. You can now decide evaluate. I want to check whether this server meets this condition. It says yes, it meets this condition. You get. Now, the reason why you want to do something like this is for governance, control purposes. Let's say you run an enterprise. Like now, we want to enforce Windows authentication, right? You can define this condition on one server and then use it to evaluate all other servers. That means you can actually determine targets. I've forgotten how to put in the targets, but you can put in the targets, and then you'll be able to determine whether people are installing SQL Server the way you want.
Okay,
You get my point?
I get it.
It's just like a policy that you have set in the country and say, okay, every time we go to negotiate with a country, we are not going to take loan from that country. Then you now have a system that you want to enforce that policy. So here I have defined the policy. I can enable the policy. I can export it and import it to another server. I can also, there are also ways to
And then
use
it will work.
Yes, of course it works. It means that when somebody wants to enable SQL Server authentication, it will not be allowed. You get? Or depending on what you say, you can say report them. Report
Okay.
the people that are not aligning with my policy. Right? Or you
So
can say
okay. So like internal control can use this thing to
precisely.
like this.
But you see, when you define it, you have to be very sure of all your definitions. Otherwise, it can also become a headache. You understand?
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So it's something that you really plan and say, okay, I want to evaluate all my instances with these rules, and you define all the rules and then use it to evaluate them.
So that means that if I bring an initiative like this
Yes.
for us to implement, I think
Yeah.
it will be loud about now.
Yeah. Just you have to learn it very well. Like you see how it took
Learn
time
very
to find
like I will learn it very well.
you
Like know
learn
the
all the conditions, how to set them up. Then use some test servers and check whether they are working the way you expect. And then you now define them. You can either decide that you export the policy, and every time you install SQL, you import that policy to check whether all your requirements are met. There are a lot of details. You can even say, you can do things like even how much memory you have allocated. I mean, depths of detail. So you now use it to control how instances are deployed in your environment.
wow.
You can also have resource governor. You can have resource governor. You can say create resource pools. And I think, how do you do it again? New resource pool. So I can say, okay, I want enable resource governor. I want maximum CPU. I don't want you to use more than 70% of CPU. You understand? Does that sound nice? Are you there? So let me leave the default. Hello, Prince. Hello.
Yeah, hello there.
Okay. So look at this. This is interesting. Oh. This is another interesting area. Now I can say I don't want you to use more than 100% or more than 80% of CPU. Let me just use this as an example, right? And I say, okay, workload groups. Let's say I create a new group, or I can create more than one. I'll come back and do that. Okay. Let's say a small DBs. I think you can do that. Importance, medium, whatever. and then I say, if I remember, classify function. Yeah, this one you also need to quite study it a lot, but the point is when you create those resource pools and workload, you can enable it such that the databases that you allocate this workload group will not be able to go beyond, let's say, 70% of CPU, something like that.
Wow.
So that way you can control the resource usage in your instance.
Mm.
So it's another very
In fact, there is more to learn than to be doing log shipping
I'm
every
telling you
day.
precisely. So it's a lot. I've not used it extensively before, like I said, because when you start doing those things, you're just creating more work somehow because you have to pay attention. Otherwise, you have yes, you have to pay
No,
attention.
but you see, right now, business or management or the leaders will want people who will
Initiative.
bring new
Yeah.
things on board, things
Yes.
which will make work kind
Better.
of secure, kind of like you get me.
Yeah, so you can explore it. Resource governance. Let's say, okay, limit memory. That way, one database cannot come and cause problems for your entire instance. You get.
Eh,
So you can create some simple rules on CPU, memory, even IO, and you'll be able to manage. When somebody is hitting that limit, you now try to find out why it is hitting the limit without disturbing others. You can classify your databases, into the important ones, the medium, the small, all those kind of things. So there's documentation on it as well. Then of course extended events. This is the new this is the new version of Profiler. So here, there's nothing much happening here, so nothing is coming. So it will, in real time, give you a trace of what is happening in your environment. You can create your own new
what's happening?
sessions. You can create new sessions depending on what you want to see. So these are all subjects that can be studied on their own right. You get my point. Maintenance plans, of course, you're familiar with this already. Instead of doing index rebuild individually, you can just create maintenance plans and say, okay, I want this, let's just name it anything we like. I want this maintenance plan to do several things. I want it to, first of all, I want it to do, let's see, I want it to do index rebuild. Where is it again? Let's see. Okay, so plan properties. Okay. Okay. Where is it? Oh, I've forgotten what to do here. Subplan properties. Okay. Anyway, let's use the wizard. Okay. Now it's maintenance plan. I want to what? Shrink database, rebuild index, what? Whatever else. Clean up, update statistics. I can do multiple things at the same time. And for each of them, there's a description of what it really means. For
So
example,
hold on a minute, a minute.
yes.
So the like the shrink database, it will shrink the database or what? Like
Yeah, precisely.
when it, like automatically it will just be doing that for you.
It will just be doing that for you, yes. But you see, like I used to say that I don't like that method, except maybe it's a very small database where after shrinking, you now rebuild. You get my point? After shrinking, you now rebuild. So this
But
maintenance plan, in my view,
shrinking database is very critical.
yeah, in my view, but if you want to do it, let it be something you can really manage, not the one that when it starts shrinking, you now start having an outage you didn't plan for. Of course, you schedule it at night, but schedule in such a way that after it does it, maybe it will do an index review that will finish before the next business day. You have to test it very well. So when you select what you want to do, you determine the order. Let's say like now I said it will shrink first, rebuild index,
Update,
update starts, clean up
update
history.
status,
So you can
clean
change
up.
the order. Then when it does that, you now say which database is this going to apply to? Is it all? Is it system? Is it all user? Or is this specific database? Let's say we select only one. And then
We should shrink it to
after
beyond
shrinking,
conditions.
yeah, they define the conditions of shrinking. Then for the index rebuild, they determine which one do you want to do. Maybe it's just one. Ignore the database state is not online. You can decide to do all or all user databases and ignore databases that are offline. That way it will not give errors when it's doing the index rebuild. Then you can even determine things like fragmentation, things like yes, sort in term DB, keep index online, mark stop, how much parallelism can you use, right? All those details, define it. Then which database is it? Are you for statistics, data stats, all databases, ignore these ones. Then you, yes, update. You see there are column statistics and index statistics. You can decide to do all, full scan, or sample by what, 25%. When you do sample, if you have a very large table, it's better to do sampling. Then when you are done with all that, yes, this is delete history. So you remember that sometimes your logs, your backup and log historical history, where especially when we're using log shipping, it can grow very large. So you can set up jobs like this to clear the history, clear all the other histories, and keep them to a reasonable level. Data maintenance clean task, okay. Delete files, yes, even backup files, if assuming you are doing backups online, but you don't even need this, and so on and so forth. So you can go into details on all this, and then it will write a report somewhere for you, or email the report, right? You can email the report.
Okay.
Right? That's fine, right? So when we finish, and you see that it will show up as a job in your list of jobs. So if you have
So what would be the name? What would be the name for this particular job?
No, because I'll show you now. Because we didn't give it a specific name, we just called it maintenance plan. If you notice at the beginning you have the option of selecting the name, so but we just called it maintenance plan. But let me show you the job name. Just maintenance plan 1 or something like that. So you see the jobs here, maintenance plan subplan 1. Now when you go to the details of this job, you see that it doesn't look like the regular job. Well, it looks like regular at this step, but when you go to the steps, you see what it looks like, right? Subplan. So you can't see you can't see any details here. You have to go to the maintenance plan list, right? To actually see the details of this plan. Let's see. Is it? Yes. Modify. Yes. Right. Okay. So let's look at it again. All right, cool. So this our subplan 1 has 3 steps. You can see that it looks like SQL Server, SSIS, or SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studio because it's based on the same technology. So it does the first task, does another one, does the obsolete statistics, and so on and so forth. So it's a sequence. If you double click it, it will show you the details of what you selected before, right? You can even see the SQL.
The query under it.
Yes, you can see the script. See the script. If you go to the rebuild index, you can see the scripts under it as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Where's the script? I can't see this for rebuild index.
1 minute. View to SQL, right?
Okay.
This one takes a bit of time because it's probably a long script. So please hurry up. Generating state SQL script. Okay. It's coming soon.
Wow.
Oh,
It's very
something.
interesting.
Something's going to generate. All right. So they're all key concepts that you can explore and dig more into. Maybe do things in a new way. You know.
There's
Okay.
next level DBA.
Yeah, next level DBA. Just use the tools that are provided and do a lot of things. Okay. What else?
Thank you
Database, you're familiar with that one and so on. So we can go through it again later on when Iban is here in the next session.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
To read more and do more, I'll send you the slides. Refresh.
All right, sure.
I'll also upload the video on YouTube and give you the link.
Okay.
All right then. Yeah.
I'll even share it with my colleagues because them too they've raised it in one of our meetings that they want like a fundamental build up on SQL.
Yeah.
So I'll share the link you upload on Facebook on
YouTube.
on online what do you call it,
Yeah.
YouTube or something. I'll share it with them, then they can also be watching it.
All right, cool. No problem. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
See you. Yeah.